Have you ever really stopped to think about what you have in common with, say, a giant redwood tree? Or even the bacteria living in your gut? Well, it turns out the answer is in the tiny microscopic building blocks that make up all of us. So today, we are going to go on a tour of the 4 master molecules that create all the amazing diversity of life on Earth. So let me ask you this. What are you really made of? And I don't mean just, skin and bones and all that. I mean, what are the fundamental, rock-bottom molecules that build every single part of you? We're about to go on a little construction tour, starting with the single most important atom and building our way right up to the complex machinery that is life itself.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to meet life's ultimate building block. Then, we'll cover the 2 super simple rules for putting everything together. After that, we'll get introduced to the 4 master molecules. And finally, we'll zoom in on each of them. Sound good? Let's get to it.
Okay, part 1, life's ultimate building block. Our whole journey, it really starts with just one element. The undisputed MVP of biology, carbon. It is the backbone, the absolute foundation for pretty much all of life's complex molecules.
So what's carbon's superpower? Why is it so special? Well, it all comes down to this number, 4. You see, a single carbon atom can form 4 incredibly strong and stable connections. We call these covalent bonds with other atoms. Just think about that. The ability to link up in 4 different directions at the same time. That's the whole secret to its amazing versatility. It is the ultimate connector.
And because it can form those 4 bonds, carbon can link up with other carbon atoms to build these long, straight chains, or branched structures, or even really complex rings. It's basically nature's ultimate Lego brick, right? It can build an almost infinite variety of shapes. And this one feature, this versatility, is the foundation for everything else we're about to talk about.
All right, so we've got our ultimate building block, carbon. But how does life actually put it all together? Well, it turns out nature uses 2 surprisingly simple rules for almost all of its construction projects. One rule for building molecules up, and another one for breaking them back down.
And here are those 2 rules. To build big molecules from smaller ones, life uses something called dehydration synthesis. It works by linking small units together, and in the process it removes a water molecule. So just imagine clicking 2 Lego bricks together and a tiny drop of water pops out. Now, to do the opposite, to break those big molecules apart, it uses hydrolysis. It's the exact reverse. You just add a water molecule back in, and snap, the bond breaks. The main takeaway here is super simple. You remove water to build, and you add water to break. That's it.
Okay, so we've got our carbon backbone and our 2 rules of assembly. With just those tools, life builds 4 major classes of giant molecules. These are the absolute pillars of biology.
First up, we have carbohydrates. You probably just call them carbs. These are all your sugars and starches, and they are the #1 go-to source for quick, easy-to-access energy. They also play a really big role in structural support. Next on the list, we've got lipids. Now, these are your fats, oils, and waxes. They're fantastic for storing energy long-term, but more importantly, and this is critical, they form the membranes that wrap around every single one of your cells.
Then we get to the proteins. Man, proteins are the real workhorses. If carbon is the brick, then proteins are the construction workers, the machines, the messengers, even the building itself. They are just unbelievably versatile, doing a million different jobs inside the cell.
And finally, we have the nucleic acids. This is your DNA and your RNA. Think of these as the blueprints, the master instruction manuals that store and carry all the genetic information needed to build and run an entire organism.
All right, let's dive a bit deeper into our first 2 categories, shall we? These are the molecules that mostly deal with energy and structure, carbohydrates and lipids.
So carbohydrates can be really simple or incredibly complex. The most basic unit is a single sugar, a monosaccharide, like glucose. That's the immediate fuel for our cells. Now, when you link a bunch of these together, you get a polysaccharide. This is how living things store energy. Plants store it as starch. We animals store a version called glycogen, mainly in our muscles and liver for when we need a quick boost. Oh, and you know that crunch when you bite into celery? That's cellulose, a super tough carb that plants use to build their cell walls. And here's a fun fact. Our bodies can't actually break it down for energy, which is exactly why we call it dietary fiber.
Now let's talk about lipids, specifically fats. You've heard the terms saturated and unsaturated a million times, right? Well, the difference is actually pretty simple. Saturated fats have these nice, straight carbon chains that can pack together really tightly. That makes them solid at room temperature. Think butter. Unsaturated fats, on the other hand, have these kinks or bends in their chains, so they can't pack together as neatly. That's why they're liquid, like olive oil.
Okay, let's move on to our final two master molecules. If you think of carbs and lipids as the fuel and the framework of the building, then proteins and nucleic acids, well, they're the information and the action. They're the ones carrying out the plans. So here's the thing about proteins. No matter how complicated they get, every single one is built from a set of just 20 small molecules called amino acids. The best way to think of them is like 20 different colored beads on a string. They're linked together one by one into these really long chains, and that special connection holding them together, it's called a peptide bond. Now, for a protein, its function is everything about its 3D shape, and it gets that shape in 4 levels. The primary structure is just the sequence of amino acids, right? The order of the beads. That chain then starts to automatically twist and fold into simple patterns, like coils or sheets. That's its secondary structure. Then, the whole thing scrunches up on itself into a final, complex 3D glob. That's the tertiary structure. And for some proteins, like hemoglobin that carries oxygen in your blood, you have multiple chains that all have to combine to make one giant working machine. That's the quaternary structure.
Let's look at the key information molecules. DNA. Think of that as the master blueprint. It's got all the original instructions, and it's kept safe in the main office. RNA is more like a temporary photocopy of just one page of that blueprint. It's a message that gets sent out to the factory floor to tell the workers, the proteins, what to build. And then you've got ATP. Now, ATP isn't part of the information system. It's the actual energy, the cash currency that powers the entire operation. So how does this little ATP battery work? It's actually genius. The key is in its name, triphosphate. It has 3 phosphate groups, and those bonds holding them together are packed with energy, kind of like a compressed spring. When the cell needs to get something done, it just snaps off that last phosphate. That break releases a burst of usable energy. It is the perfect little rechargeable battery that powers almost everything that happens in your body. So there you have it. We've basically built life from the ground up, right? From that one versatile carbon atom, using those 2 simple rules of building up and breaking down to construct our 4 master molecules. We've seen over and over how the shape is absolutely essential for what they do. Which leaves us with one final and really important question to think about. What happens when just one of those blocks, one single amino acid in a giant protein, or just one letter in the DNA code is in the wrong place? The answer to that question really shows you just how fragile and, at the same time, how magnificent this whole molecular machine really is.